I never believed in ghosts, at least not until I set foot in that house. It was an old Victorian mansion, standing on the outskirts of town, wrapped in a suffocating silence. People whispered about it, stories of flickering lights, shadows that moved on their own, and most unsettling of all, a piano that played itself in the dead of night. But I wasn't the superstitious type. When I got the opportunity to stay there for a few weeks, I took it without hesitation. The house belonged to my late great-uncle, a man I had never met. After his death, the property sat abandoned for years, gathering dust and rumors. The lawyer handling his estate contacted me, saying I was one of the few remaining family members, and if I wished, I could stay there while deciding what to do with it. It sounded simple enough. A free place to stay, a break from my cramped apartment, and maybe even a chance to sell it for a good price. The moment I stepped inside, a strange chill ran through me. The air was thick, heavy, as if the house itself was watching me. The grand chandelier above the entrance was coated in dust, its crystals dull and lifeless. Old paintings lined the walls, their eyes following me as I moved. And then, in the far end of the parlor, I saw it, the piano. It was a magnificent, antique grand piano, its black surface smooth but covered in a thin layer of dust. The keys, though yellowed with age, still held an eerie kind of elegance. I wasn't a musician, but something about it pulled at me. I ran my fingers over the keys lightly. They were ice cold. That night, I struggled to sleep. The house groaned inside, the way old buildings do. The wind whispered through the cracks in the windows, and the trees outside scraped against the glass. But just as I was finally slipping into unconsciousness, a sound made my blood run cold. A single note. It was faint, but unmistakable. The deep, resonant tone of the piano. I sat up, heart pounding. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was the wind. But then another note rang out, followed by another, forming a slow, melancholic melody. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight, and crept down the hallway. Each step felt heavier, as if something unseen was pressing against me. The melody continued, sorrowful and deliberate, as if played by unseen hands. When I reached the parlor, the music stopped abruptly. The piano sat there, silent, untouched. The air felt colder than before, thick with something unseen. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. My own breath was loud in my ears. With a shaky hand, I reached out and lifted the piano lid. The hammers and strings were still, perfectly still. But as I turned to leave, a whisper brushed against my ear, so close I could feel the breath. "You're not supposed to be here." I spun around, heart hammering, but there was no one there. Just the empty room and the silent, waiting piano. The next night, I locked my bedroom door. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the piano must have some mechanical issue. Old strings shifting, maybe a draft running through the house. But no amount of reasoning could shake the unease settling in my chest. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house felt amplified in the darkness. Every rustling leaf outside like a whisper against the windows. My phone lay beside me, its screen dim, my fingers hovering over the flashlight button, just in case. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the music started again. This time, there was no mistaking it. A slow, deliberate tune drifted up the staircase, each note striking deep in my chest like a pulse. My skin prickled. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't random. It wasn't the wind. Someone, or something, was playing. I hesitated for a long moment before forcing myself out of bed. My hands trembled as I gripped my phone, using its weak glow to light my way. The air grew colder with every step toward the parlor, the melody weaving through the silence of the house. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the music stopped. I froze. The room was still, too still. My flashlight flickered. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, stretching toward me as if alive. I swallowed hard, stepping closer to the piano. It looked the same, dusty, unmoved. But then I noticed something different. The piano bench had been pulled out. I was sure I had pushed it in earlier. A shiver ran down my spine as I reached out with a shaking hand, nudging the bench back under the piano. The second I did, a loud bang echoed through the room. The lid of the piano slammed shut on its own. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my ears. My phone light wavered as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of movement. The air was thick, heavy, like something unseen was pressing down on me. Then I heard it. Breathing. It was faint, just behind me. So close, I should have felt the warmth of it on my neck. My entire body went rigid. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I ran. I bolted up the stairs, my pulse hammering against my skull, and slammed the bedroom door shut behind me. My hands shook as I locked it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, from the hallway outside, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps. They stopped just outside my door. Silence. I held my breath, listening. And then, a single knock. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't dare move. Then the whisper came again. Soft, almost gentle this time. Let me in. A cold, sinking dread settled in my stomach. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, I had convinced myself that I needed answers. Either I was losing my mind, or something was truly wrong with this house. The rational part of me wanted to believe it was all just sleep deprivation, stress, maybe even some old pipes making strange noises at night. But the knock on my door, the whisper, those things weren't something I could explain away. I decided to start with the piano itself. I spent the day researching the house, combing through old newspaper archives online. The property had been in my family for decades, but it was my great-uncle who had lived here the longest. No one knew much about him. He had never married, never had children, and rarely spoke to anyone in town. But the deeper I dug, the stranger things became. An article from 1956 caught my attention. It mentioned a woman, Eleanor Price. She had been a pianist, a prodigy, and according to the article, she had lived in this very house. The details were vague, but it seemed she had died young, under mysterious circumstances. The only thing the article mentioned about her death was that she had been found slumped over the piano. My blood ran cold. There is no official cause of death listed. No reports of foul play. Just a quiet, forgotten tragedy buried beneath decades of dust. I needed more. I dug through the attic, searching for anything that might give me a clue. Old trunks, stacks of yellowed papers, boxes filled with brittle photographs. And then, tucked away in the corner, I found an old leather-bound journal. The name, Eleanor Price, was scrawled on the inside cover. I flipped through the pages. The ink faded, but still legible. At first it was filled with mundane details, music rehearsals, letters from friends, her love for the piano. But as I read further, the tone shifted. The notes are wrong. Someone else is playing when I'm not. I hear it at night, a melody I never wrote, but it comes from my hands. Something is inside the piano. It watches me when I play. The last entry was short. I'm afraid. My hands shook as I closed the journal. My mind raced with possibilities. Had she gone mad? Had something driven her to her death? Or had she been telling the truth? I knew I needed to hear the melody again that night. I didn't lock my door. I didn't run. I waited. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the piano began to play. I forced myself to move, to walk toward the sound. The air was thick, suffocating, but I pushed forward. The melody was haunting, slow, and filled with sorrow. It called to me, pulled me closer. I stepped into the parlor. The bench was pulled out again. The keys moved, pressing down one by one. But no one was there. And then, for the first time, I saw her. A figure, barely visible, sitting at the piano. A woman, her head bowed, fingers gliding over the keys. Her face was hidden, hair cascading over her shoulders like a curtain of shadow. My breath caught in my throat. She stopped playing. Slowly her head turned toward me, and then she smiled. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The woman, Eleanor, sat at the piano, her fingers still hovering over the keys. Her smile wasn't one of warmth. It was wrong, stretched too wide, filled with something I couldn't name. Then she stood up. The air in the room shifted, pressing against me like an invisible weight. My body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place, locked in her gaze. Her eyes, deep, empty, endless, stared straight through me. And then she whispered, "You heard my song." Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but it sent ice through my veins. She took a step forward. The floor beneath me groaned as the temperature dropped even further. My breath came out in small white puffs. My hands trembled as I slowly backed away, my legs feeling like they were made of stone. I played for him too, you know. Her head tilted, her expression darkening, and he made me stop. I didn't understand. Who was she talking about? My great uncle? Someone before him? My thoughts were racing, but she kept moving forward, closing the space between us. Then suddenly, the entire house shook. A deep, guttural boom echoed through the walls, rattling the chandelier, making dust rain from the ceiling. Eleanor's head snapped toward the piano as if something had called her. And then I saw it. The piano, its lid rising on its own. The keys began slamming down violently, an aggressive, discordant sound filling the room. It was no longer a melody. It was a warning. Eleanor screamed, not in fear, not in pain, in rage. Her body twisted, convulsed, her face warping into something monstrous. The house trembled harder, pictures falling from the walls, the windows shaking in their frames. I finally found my legs and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I sprinted up the stairs, down the hallway, toward the one place I thought I'd be safe, my bedroom. As soon as I slammed the door shut, the whispers started. He silenced me. He buried my song. "Now you will play for me." The piano started again. Not just playing, it was screaming. The sound of the keys pounding, the strings groaning, the very walls vibrating with its fury. And then the door burst open. Eleanor stood there, her face twisted in an unnatural grin, her eyes nothing but hollow pits. She lunged. Darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up to silence. The room was still. Sunlight streamed through the cracked window. The house no longer felt heavy, no longer carried the same suffocating weight. But the piano, it was gone. Not broken, not moved. Gone. I searched every inch of the house, but there was no trace of it. No bench, no lid, no strings. It was as if it had never existed. That same day, I packed my bags and left. I didn't look back. But sometimes, in the silence of the night, I still hear it. A slow, sorrowful melody drifting through the air. And I know she's still playing.